So I had a few students reach out to me and ask if I'd publish some content on cybersecurity. I racked my brain for a few weeks and I had sort of a light bulb moment where I thought, why don't I talk about cybersecurity leadership first? I spent the last week at a cool first time event called CruiseCon, and I was encouraged by some folks there also to put some content out on YouTube and LinkedIn. So I thought, why not? I'm already recording lectures and everything else for my students every week. I don't know how frequently I'm going to get content out here, but I figure I have a little bit of time early in the morning or over lunch to record some content, so why not? I also want to start by saying that these views don't reflect my organization, right? They're my personal learning journeys that I've been on with students, some other folks in the field, and through some personal reading. I've been rereading this book, which is the CISO Desk Reference Guide, version 3. I had read it a little while ago, and it was recommended as a refresher at CruiseCon. And I thought, there's some really interesting points for discussion in the book, so why not use them as a basis to record a video here. Again, I need to thank CruiseCon and a lot of the attendees there for sort of the inspiration here along with my students. But the first thought that kind of comes to mind is, where should a CISO be positioned within an organization? I would say that positioning seems to me to be based on how an organization views risk. In organizations that view cybersecurity risk as expansive across the entire organization and not just the responsibility of IT, and you can choose what you call IT in your organization, they likely have the role outside of IT reporting lines. And instead, they'll have the role report to a CFO or CEO. And I saw a lot of that last week. But those organizations that view cybersecurity risk as primarily an IT issue likely have the CISO reporting to a CIO, CTO, or some other form of IT-centric role. I know there's a lot of terms that we toss about out there. But the writers of the CISO Desk Reference Guide, they would say that there's sort of 3 factors that feed into a decision about where to put the CISO in an organization. They would say organizational maturity, business domain, and skill alignment all feed into that decision. I'm an academic a little bit, so let's discuss terms, right? By organizational maturity, they mean how mature is the organization with managing holistic risk. The business domain, that concerns the level of regulation, maybe the number of threats facing an organization, or if the organization is in a highly technical market. By skill alignment, we're talking about whether the skills within the cybersecurity group align with the rest of the business, right? The text asks questions like, where does risk management lie? Where does business continuity lie? And how is technology managed from a geographic perspective, right? Or do you have one central IT organization, or do you have IT organizations that are scattered throughout the globe? I think a CISO really needs to be empowered to take decisions to protect an organization without any sort of interference. So in a less mature organization, placing the CISO under the CEO might be the right positioning, right? If you're underneath the CISO, or if you're under the CEO and you make the decision to say, hey, I need to cut a location off, I need to block XYZ piece of software, you likely are going to have the authority to do so. In some organizational designs, I could see where IT or finance has enough pull to make those critical decisions with the authority that's necessary. In others, you might see that IT or finance is just a sub-department of another group, and maybe the authority really isn't there that the CISO needs to do their job. If the organization is entrepreneurial, right, where you have dozens of locations that are all doing their own thing and all have their own IT standards, which from talking to folks last week, I think happens more times than we like to think it does, maybe the right answer is that it doesn't really matter where the CISO lives, and it's really more important to have champions for information security in different parts of the business. This is something that I heard repeatedly from talking to folks last week that a champion program is a great way, if you're sort of a decentral organization, to get your mission from a cybersecurity perspective out there. I think the business domain is pretty self-explanatory. Just as an example, when I work with my students, we spend time with the FFIEC, which is the Federal Financial Institutions Exam Council. They set a list of guidance that include having banking organizations sign off on information security policies, business continuity, and it provides clear, I think, sort of reporting structure to ensure the separation of duties for the cybersecurity organization. And it's something that I spend a lot of time talking about in the courses that I teach to my students. I question at times whether some organizations and CISOs, though, understand the regulatory market laws, guidelines, and so forth that might apply to them. I had a really interesting discussion with someone last week. In their organization accepts credit cards. And they didn't realize that they were subject to aspects of PCI, payment card industry compliance. And I've had those conversations over the years where, a small mom and pop, what have you, is taking credit cards for crafts, and they don't realize maybe that they need to segment payment card terminals, or right, wrong, or indifferent, or completely reliant upon their payment card processing company to tell them what they need to do. And there's of course other aspects to this that include, are you selling products that are subject to all the new laws that are coming out surrounding secure design or secure by default? Or maybe you are in an organization that has a business domain that's critical, like critical infrastructure, critical manufacturing, or all of these critical industries that we're hearing about now, where you're frequently a target, that might change the decision about where the CISO is placed in an organization. In terms of skill set, another obvious highlight to me is within skill set and skill alignment. A CISO needs to be able to talk to various business leaders about risk and remove the technical aspects of the conversation. I think of it sort of like teaching new students, right? It's really important to be able to explain what the impact is of these things from a risk or financial perspective, or the way that particular organization needs to be talked to about the subject of cybersecurity. We also need to build the skill set of being a business partner. And this is something I spent quite a bit of time in my doctoral research talking about, and something I'm really passionate about. It's not best to be the party of no if you want acceptance for the controls that you put in place. And if you want to know more about that, go read my doctoral dissertation. We need to learn the business model and work with the business leaders to develop controls that help the business succeed rather than being the party of no. I would say it's probably not the second time in my career that I've heard it, but the second time in my career, I heard an individual who was at the event last week, Jerich Beason, and forgive me if I pronounced your name wrong, but he said, we shouldn't ever say no. We need to be the party of yes, but here are the conditions, here are the risks to the organization, and the business has the capability to accept the risk, or we have the ability to tag conditions onto that yes. So I think the positioning in the organization probably has some impact in our ability to have those discussions. In another video, I'll probably undertake the thought of whether security operations teams should report to the CISO, or who exactly should report to the CISO, which is probably a bit of a controversial topic that depends by organization. But the question that I'd like to ask here is, where do you think the CISO should exist within the organization? Is it more complicated than that? Is it more simple than that? I also heard the question asked last week, or a statement was made that a CISO would ask in an interview, where do you see the role of cybersecurity existing within the organization? and if the person you're interviewing with says, well, it's all on your team as the CISO, that's probably not an acceptable answer. And in today's age, everyone's really responsible for cybersecurity. And I thought that was kind of an interesting statement and goes to the view that some organizations have on the role of the CISO. So where do you think a CISO should exist, and how do you feel about cybersecurity being everyone's responsibility in some way, shape, or form? I look forward to your comments. I know not everyone's going to agree with what I have to say and what the CISO Desk Reference Guide has to say, but let's talk about it. Thanks.